Timelines of Outlander are confusing at best, and Gellis Duncan is no exception to this. I think in order to understand Gellis's timeline specifically, you have to remember that when we are watching Outlander as a viewer, we are watching Claire's timeline and the events that take place consecutively for her. It would also apply to Bree and Roger because we get their point of view and their timelines in later seasons. However, if we were watching Outlander from the point of view of Gellis, the timeline would look very different. If we were watching from Gellis's point of view, this is her actual timeline. Gellis is born, is living, and is existing in 1968 when we first meet her on her timeline. This is also where she meets Bree, Roger, and Claire, and they all see her travel through the stones. When she travels, she actually goes further back than 200 years and ends up in the year 1733. When she arrives in 1733, she is living in an old croft house with a man much older than her. We have no idea what happened other than the fact that the house burns down, the man is found hung, and the wife has moved to the village of Cranesmere. Next on Gellis's timeline is the year 1739. This is where we see her meet Roger, Buck, and Dougal. Remember, Roger and Buck had traveled back and they had landed in 1739. Gellis at this point had been living in the past for 6 years from 1968, and this is her timeline. Continuing on her timeline, in 1743, Gellis meets Claire. At this point in time, she is pregnant with Buck, and this is when the witch trials take place. Jumping back a second, when Buck is starting to develop a heart condition here in 1739, it's because he is getting dangerously close to the year that he is conceived and born. After the witch trials, Dougal helps Gellis escape after she gives birth to Buck and gives him to another family. Dougal helps Gellis escape to Paris, where she lives in France under the name of Melisandre. She gets pregnant with the Comte Saint-Germain. She has 2 other husbands who pass away, and she lives there until 1755. All these dead husbands seem very Gellis-like. After France, we see in 1755 that Gellis travels to Selkie Island, meets Cotton Malone, and then leaves for Jamaica. Lives there on her timeline until we see her again in 1767 when Claire and Jamie arrive in Jamaica. This is where her timeline ends and Claire ends her life in the cave Abendaway. It's confusing because after we see her die in Jamaica, she comes back in season 7 and we see her in 1739. That is because Roger and Buck are jumping into her timeline where she already existed in that period of time. When they jump out of that timeline, she is still consecutively living all the way up until her death in Jamaica. All this time in the 60s, she is just considered a missing person because you can only exist in one timeline at a time. This is her timeline. We're just seeing everyone else's timeline and watching them jump in and out of it. If we were watching from her point of view, this would all happen consecutively, and when she died, it would be over. I have no idea if I just made that better or worse, but yeah, I hope this helps.